All right, so first I'd like to introduce the panelists that are here with me tonight. Jenny, would you like to do a quick hello to everyone?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jenny Cavano, and I'm the Program Director for CODSN, and I am the proud mother of a young man who's 24 years old that experiences a developmental disability, and that's what brings me to my work here.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Emily Katesh, and I am the ODHS, or Oregon Department of Human Services, foster family recruitment and retention champion.
Okay, Danielle, are you able to introduce yourself?
I am. My name is Danielle Grimes, and I'm the Community Development Coordinator for District 10 DHS Child Welfare and Self-Sufficiency Programs.
Thank you. So my name is Diane Harrison. I'll introduce myself a little more in a second. I just wanted to let you know that if you hover on your little bar of options, you have one that's Q&A. So at any time, if you have a question, feel free to go ahead and type it in that Q&A. Jenny is going to be answering some of those questions as we go. And then at the end of the presentation, there will be a big chunk of time to answer questions for you guys. There's a lot of material here, and so I want to get through and give you guys a chance to answer your questions. This presentation is put on by Central Oregon Disability Support Network. We are actually a family network that works throughout Central Oregon, as well as Region 7, which is Wheeler, Grant, Lake, Harney, Klamath, Deschutes, Crook, Jefferson. I guess that's all of them. I count 8. So I didn't forget anybody, but we work throughout all of those counties. We have a couple of bilingual staff, and we're able to work with Spanish-speaking families as well as English-speaking families, and all of that. So if you're interested or know somebody interested in any of this material in Spanish, let us know. We would be happy to get this material to them. Tonight, our presentation will all be in English. We didn't have anybody sign up for translation, but doesn't want to advance. There we go. Sorry, technical difficulties. So what brings me here is this fiery little strawberry blonde who hopefully won't pop in, but you may get to see her in the background while I'm doing the presentation. She was born in 2003 here in Central Oregon, and within 2 hours of her birth, we were notified that she had 3 pretty significant diagnoses. She's our 3rd child. The 2 boys in the picture that are our oldest, and so Victoria was born in 2003, and she was within those 2 hours, we were given the diagnosis of Down syndrome. She had 3 holes in her heart. She had transient leukemia, and we were given some really outdated, poor information about what her future would look like. And so throughout our journey, we have discovered some amazing people and some amazing tools to help her navigate her future. She currently is a junior at Ridgeview High School in Redmond. She was working until COVID at Mazatlan in Redmond. She's currently laid off until it's safe for her to be back in the restaurant and working with more people. She wants to be a chef, and so her goals are to graduate from Ridgeview and attend the Culinary Institute at COCC. She has been saving for her college tuition for quite a few years, and she has some pretty fun goals. I'll be sharing some stories throughout my presentation in reference to her or our personal experiences with her permission, and Sometimes it's the easiest to share because I don't have to worry about confidentiality. So you'll get to know a lot about Victoria. What we're going to talk about tonight in our agenda is what is an IEP. If you're new to this process, there's a lot of language and a lot of pages to it, and what really is it, and why do we have it, and you know, as a parent or caregiver, like what is my role in this process? We're also going to talk about what is a 504 plan and what are the differences between the IEP and 504. Oftentimes that's kind of confusing too. Why would we want one versus another, and who qualifies for which? So we're going to talk about some of those things. We're definitely going to talk about your role in these meetings as a parent or, you know, guardian, caregiver, champion for kids. Like, you have a role in these meetings, and we really want to make sure that you understand how important that is. Distance learning, that's a big hot topic lately. How does distance learning change anything within these plans, and what does that look like? We're going to talk about a few strategies in order to be a good advocate during our time of distance learning and hybrid learning. We'll give you a few other resources, and then, like I said, we're going to have a time at the end for questions. We want to make sure that we answer any questions. If you have questions that are about really specific or personal situations, we can also answer those offline. You'll have our email at the end too, so if it's something that you don't feel comfortable asking to the group, that's okay. Feel free to email us. We'll be happy to help you. So what is an IEP? The individual education.
Hey, Diana, did you want to launch the poll?
Oh, I thought you were doing that. I totally forgot about that.
Okay, just give it a few seconds for people to answer a couple of questions, just to help us make sure the material's specific to what your needs are today.
Yes, these are really helpful for us. So if there is a certain population, we can really kind of tailor some things towards questions that you might have or that kind of thing. So thank you for doing this. Okay, it looks like we're 62%. Give it just a couple more seconds. Okay, Jenny, do you want to launch the second one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so here's who's here today: parents, community partners, and professionals. Okay, we're at 37, no, 50% now on the age of the student or child that you're here for. Okay, we're at 62%. We'll give it a couple more seconds. All right, you want to share our results, Jenny? Like 80% ages 6 to 10, but we have a variety, so that's great. Everything from transition into kindergarten all the way through transition to adulthood. So a good variety. Thank you guys for doing that. That was helpful. Okay, so the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, it's our federal special education law for students with disabilities. And so it is the same throughout all of the states in the US, although oftentimes it doesn't look the same district to district or building to building. And so we're gonna talk about kind of some strategies and stuff that will help you advocate for what's best for your students in an IEP. I can get it to advance. It doesn't want to. Oh, I did something now. Okay, sorry. Technology is being a challenge for me today. So special education, the purpose of IDEA is to provide a free and appropriate public education for students with disabilities. It never costs anything. It's their access to general education. It's the supports that they need to learn beside their non-disabled peers as it reads in the law. This came effect originally in 1975. It's been reauthorized several times since then. But one of the main goals for an IEP is really to prepare our kids for life after school. So thinking about what happens after they graduate, that independent living, further education, employment, all of those kinds of things. Oftentimes when Victoria was young, I was thinking about the transition to the next grade or the transition to middle school and then the transition to high school, but it's really to put your trajectory clear out here. So life after school, and what do our students need to learn to be successful after they graduate. It is acting really funny. Oh, there it goes. Finicky. So before your children qualify, they have to be found eligible under one of these disability categories. They can be found eligible under multiple, but they only need to have one eligibility code in order to qualify for services. So some of these are, you know, really common: autism spectrum disorder, deafblindness, deafness, emotional disturbance, hearing impairment, intellectual disability, multiple disabilities, orthopedic impairment, other health impairment, specific learning disability. And we've kind of listed on the slide some examples of what that might look like: speech and language impairment, traumatic brain injury, visual impairment, including blindness. So when Victoria, we did her eligibility assessment, she would have qualified under the other health impairment, the specific learning disability, or the hearing deafness. And so what we did as a team, though, is we pared that down to see which of those three categories described her the best. Which of those three categories impacted her learning more than others? And as a team, we came up with other health impairment, because even though she had hearing loss and she has a specific learning disability, the other health impairment is all of the medical stuff that happens inside her that most people don't even see, all of her GI stuff, and that is really what impacts her learning more than the other two categories. And so as a team, we settled on other health impairment. That gave her the eligibility she needed to qualify for all of the services necessary for her to be successful in her education. Jenny. Oh, there it goes. I don't know what's wrong with this thing. It won't advance. So one of the things that we talk about a lot in special education is least restrictive environment, or sometimes you'll hear people refer to it as LRE. Least restrictive environment isn't a place, it's a principle, it's what works best for your child. We always want to have the least restrictive environment for our children, and most of the time, for most students, that environment is in the general education classroom, oftentimes with support, but that general education classroom for most students is that least restrictive environment. In the special education law, it's specifically says that your child has the right to learn next to their non-disabled peers. And so all of those students are in that general education classroom. So that's where we want the majority of students on IEPs and students with disabilities to be as well. This is a super important thing to advocate for, and we're going to talk about this more throughout the presentation as well. Once we are found eligible, the school district will notify you that there's an IEP team meeting happening. And so at any IEP team meeting, these are the required members. You have the parent, which the parent is listed first in the law because the parent is the most important person. And I say parent, but it could be guardian or, foster parent, whoever is advocating for that student. Oftentimes, those are the people that know the student better than anyone on the planet. On our team, like I've been with my daughter since day one. There's been a lot of team members that have come and gone and other people that have been like in little bits of her life, but I am the constant. I'm always there. I will always be there. And so the parent or guardian is the most important part of the team. The student absolutely should participate in those team meetings whenever possible. It's their education, and especially as they get older. When Victoria was 5, I was the person that had dreams for her. I was the person that had ideas on what I wanted to advocate for her life. But at some point, she very much has an idea on what she wants her life to look like, what she wants her education to look like. And so I guess it was when we transitioned into first grade was the first time that she started being a part of her IEP meeting. And at that point, it was like literally she came into the meeting for 10 minutes. She shared her one-page profile, which we're going to talk about those. And she shared 4 slides because she was really fascinated with the clicker that I used to use for work. And so she put together these slides, and it was pretty cute because it was like, I love my horse. I love Miss Holly, who was one of the staff members that she got to work with, and all of these other things. But it was her opportunity to share what she was interested in, what she liked, and it was the basis of those self-advocacy skills that we're teaching our kids throughout the years. And so it's beginning that, letting them advocate for what they want, even if it's, I'd rather be at home riding my horse. So other required members are a general education teacher. It doesn't have to be the teacher that's currently teaching your child, or if you're transitioning into kindergarten, it might not be the teacher who's going to teach the kindergarten class that your student will be in, but somebody who can answer questions about what that grade level general education class looks like. Sometimes it's, as parents, like I've had questions about like, what does the schedule look like? Like, what is a normal day in kindergarten look like these days? Because my boys were quite a bit older, and so it looked different when they were in kindergarten. So a teacher that can answer any of those questions that you might have. A special education teacher that can answer the questions around, well, so my student might not sit in circle. We kind of work with special educators to come up with strategies. Sometimes it's fidgets, sometimes it's a visual schedule. Sometimes, like for Victoria, she just needed to know ahead of time, like what was going to happen next. So she could be thinking and be preparing herself for transitioning from the table to the circle time, and then from circle time back to the table. She just needed that little transition cue. And so that special educator is the person that you can ask any of those questions to, and that can help through those transitions. Oftentimes, that special education teacher that attends your meetings is your case manager. So that would be your first point of contact. Anything special education, if you have questions, concerns, that kind of stuff, that case manager is who you want to talk to. Also, is the district representative, and that person, sometimes that role can be given to a general education teacher or special education teacher. It isn't always a separate body, but it's somebody who can make decisions related to finances. So if something that the team decided was helpful for a student, maybe it's an iPad, or maybe it's Victoria had like a speaker on her desk, so the teacher would talk into a microphone and then the sound would come out of a speaker because of her hearing loss. And so that costs money. So we needed somebody at the table that it could approve anything that cost money. So that could be a separate person, or it could be that role designated to somebody else. So if you ask for something that costs money, you always want to make sure that somebody at that table can authorize that. And then we have related service providers. So that could be anything from speech and language pathologists, occupational therapists, could be behavior specialists, nurses, any of those types of people that are providing additional services to your students. For Victoria, we had occupational therapists, physical therapists, behavior specialists, you know, a variety of people, and they would all be at that table sharing their knowledge on Victoria and listening and giving ideas when we needed to brainstorm ideas around things for her to be successful going forward. So school psychologists, if they've done any sort of assessments, then you would have a school psychologist there, or whoever did the assessment, somebody that can be there to help you understand the assessment and to ask questions too about those assessments. So that's somebody, anytime there's an assessment, the person should be there to help you understand that. And then once a student has reached 16 years or older, transition services are required members, and we'll talk more about transition services. I know we have a group of you that have kiddos in that age group, so we'll cover that here in a little bit. Optional members, as a parent or guardian, you have the right to invite anyone you want to these meetings. And so I always recommend that you have somebody there. Maybe it's, you know, the other parent, maybe it's a grandparent, it can be really anyone. And part of that is just super nice. I've attended meetings a lot by myself, and you come out, you don't have anybody to talk to about those meetings or to make sure that you heard everything or heard everything correctly. Sometimes because these meetings are super emotional, as a parent, I don't sleep a couple of nights ahead of time. I am super stressed out and on edge going into these meetings. And so sometimes when I leave, I'm like, did I hear her say X, Y, and Z? And so it's so nice to have somebody else that you can debrief with after. You can go get a cup of coffee or whatever, or these days Zoom with, to be like, did you hear what I heard about this? You know, just to check in with. So super helpful. Once we hit transition, also vocational rehabilitation. If your student is looking at employment, then that's a great person to have at the table to help give you ideas around employment and what kind of resources and stuff are available. We, in most of our areas here in Central Oregon, we do have a Center for Independent Living. It's Ability is the organization here. And so sometimes their advocates will be able to come as you think about what independent living, that life after school looks like. A case manager. So if you have a case manager through DHS or through the developmental disability system, the brokerage for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, definitely you can invite that person. They're great advocates and a great addition to the team. They often know your child pretty well because they've been working with you and the child for a while. And so another great addition to the team. And then private specialists. We always had a private behavior specialist come because she was the one that knew Victoria the best in behavior. She had some really great strategies that would work. And so she was always a welcome member of the team. And then a note taker, again, kind of like that, having a friend or another family member come, having a note taker that can help you take notes is helpful. I am famous for bringing in a notepad and having great ideas about taking notes, and I walk out and there's like nothing written on my notepad. So it's nice to have somebody else that can capture some of those details for you. Oh, one thing I wanted to mention, excuse me, I'm getting over a cold and I have a little bit of a hoarse voice, is that there's no limit to the number of people that can be at the table. But if you as a parent are inviting people that aren't on the notice that they send you ahead of time, just out of common courtesy, letting the district know or your case manager know that, hey, I'm going to bring 2 extra people with me. I'm going to bring the case manager and I'm going to bring my aunt or whatever, just so they have, once we go back to meetings that aren't on Zoom, so they can have a large enough space for everybody and enough handouts. So that's just a common courtesy that is nice. So timelines on IEPs, they must be developed within 30 days once your child is found eligible. They are reviewed always annually and amended as appropriate. So you can call an IEP meeting anytime you want. There is nothing that says you can only have an IEP meeting once a year. Anytime you want to have an IEP meeting, you absolutely can have an IEP meeting. We always recommend that you ask for one in writing. And usually there's no time limit. Right now, it seems like IEP meetings are happening faster because Zoom is easier. But sometimes when we're in buildings and you have specialists that are servicing multiple buildings, it's challenging to get that many schedules coordinated, but it should be in a reasonable amount of time that the IEP meeting is scheduled. And then once you've had the meeting, they need to provide you with the updated copy of the IEP within a reasonable amount of time. And generally we see between 10 and 20 days time for them to type it up and print it and mail it to you. So that's kind of what we usually see. Procedural safeguards. Every time you're at a meeting, you should be offered procedural safeguards, and this is an explanation of your rights. It tells you as the parent, as the guardian, what your rights are. It gives you resources for dispute resolution if things don't go well, and it elevates to that point. Tells you what, how you're protected as a parent or guardian legally. So they are important. If you have 5 IEP meetings in a year, it's not necessary to collect 5 of the same document, but making sure that you have 1 each year. Oftentimes they'll change every year or every couple of years with minor changes. So it's nice to have the latest copy. So the actual document of the IEP, we're going to go through and hit some of the high points. These are all of the components. So first we have special factors. We have present levels of performance, the transition planning worksheets for students 16 and above, the assessments, goals, related services. We talked about like OT, PT, speech, all of that. We'll talk about their time and what types of accommodations and modifications, what type of support for school personnel, and then a non-participation justification. So if your student on an IEP is being pulled out of classroom for any amount of time, there has to be a statement of why. And that's one of the pages here for the IEP. Extended school year. So if your student qualifies for extended school year, then there's a section in there where you can be offered that. You can accept it or deny it. It's really up to you if that works for your student or not. And then the last part of the IEP is the placement. So where will your student be receiving services? This document builds upon itself. It's a very sequential document. the very first IEP meeting I went into to transition Victoria into kindergarten, I was like, I want to talk about placement. Like, that was my thing. Like, I didn't know about a lot of these other things, but I knew where I wanted her to go to school, and I knew what classroom I wanted her to be in, and it was with all of her neighborhood peers and friends. And so I really jumped on the placement. They're like, wait, whoa, we have to go through all of these other steps before we get to placement. So just know that. Special factors. So these are some questions that the team should ask at the beginning of every IEP meeting. You go through special factors, and these are things that you're asked. Does your child have behaviors that impede his behavior or the behavior of others? Yes or no? Does your child have limited English proficiency? Does your child, go through all of these things, and you select yes or no on either any of these things that apply. What you should know is if an answer was checked yes, so say behavior, if you check yes on this page of special factors that your child has behaviors that impedes their behavior or their learning or the learning of others, then that behavior should be addressed throughout the IEP. You don't get to just check yes here and then forget about it. It has to be addressed in the goals and any sort of modifications and accommodations. So definitely something to think about. And when you get the IEP, make sure that if the box is checked, that you do have things throughout to support the student in that area. So the PLAF, isn't that a fun acronym? Excuse me. Good grief. Students' overall strengths, interests, and preferences. This, you guys, is like the best part of the IEP. This is where you get to share about your kid. This is where you get to brag about them. You get to bring in all the good. This is the strength-based part. So this is my favorite. This is where I get to, just all the things, whether it happens in school or at home, I get to share all the things she's interested in, she's good at. I don't have to talk about all the things she can't do, won't do, and probably will never do, because that's exhausting. So we're going to give you a couple of tools and ways that you can share your input on this section. This also has academic achievement. So a lot of times that is from little assessments that the teachers have done or that kind of thing. It'll have information for you about where the student's at. So it might say, Johnny knows 24 out of 26 letters of the alphabet. Sally knows 4 out of 8 of the common shapes, those kinds of things. So academic achievement and functional performance, those are kind of a report out from the district. And what I would say in these is to read them and make sure that they seem consistent with the kids that make sure that there isn't something that's glaring, because sometimes in those sections, you'll see something that's like, are you talking about my kid? Like, that doesn't even make sense. Or, oh, wow, I had no idea that they knew all those letters, because when we do it at home, he pretends he doesn't know any. So it's just good to read it and make sure that it aligns with the knowledge that you have of your student. So this is one of my favorite tools. This is the one-page profile. This is something that you can do for any reason, at any time. And we have used this for Victoria. We used a one-page profile when she transitioned into kindergarten. We've used it when we signed her up for Parks and Rec. We've used it for new babysitters that didn't know her very well, because within 2 minutes, they can get a ton of information from this one page that will make both of their time together successful. And so this is where you share all the goodness that I was just talking about. What they like, what they can do, and also support needs. So for Victoria, one of the most important things that I could share to the team is that she needs a notification when a transition is going to happen. She needs a heads up, like, hey, we're moving from the table to the circle, or vice versa. Hey, 5 minutes till recess. Like, those things made it successful with her. Without having those little cues of what's coming next, it was meltdowns. It was, I don't want to go to recess. It was like, you know, it looked pretty different if she didn't know ahead of time that a transition was happening. And so that's the type of information that you would want to share on here. Another story that I love because it was such a game changer is I was working with this one team, and we came back together because the kindergarten teacher was like, I don't even know what to do. He has been under the table nonstop for 3 weeks. Like, he doesn't want to come out for lunch, like nothing. And she's like, I don't know what to do. I need some help. And so we sat around the table and we brainstormed, and Mom was sitting next to me, and she was really quiet and shy and kind of nervous about this whole meeting, right? Like we all are when we're going into these meetings with all these professionals we don't know. And she said, well, he does like dinosaurs. She said it real quiet. And I was like, oh, he likes dinosaurs. Okay. So the teacher grabbed onto that, and she was like, you know what? I'm going to go get a book from the library to read for circle time tomorrow about dinosaurs. So she proceeded to build dinosaurs into his day. She bought little plastic ones that he could count when they were doing math. They were all different colors. So when they were sorting colors, she used those little dinosaurs for him to be able to sort colors. The coloring sheets that he got to color were all of a sudden dinosaur coloring sheets. And that, for that boy, was a game changer. All of a sudden, we have a 5-year-old boy who spent 3 weeks under a table. Within a week, was out participating in all of the activities with his peers just because that mom shared that he loved dinosaurs. And so that's just one of my favorite stories because it was such a game changer. And so those little things that you know about the child that you're advocating for, about your kid, those are so important sometimes that we don't even realize. And sometimes as a parent, so guilty of it. Like, I know her so well, and she does these same things. Like, sometimes I forget the things that she's interested in or likes. And the very first transition meeting for her to go to kindergarten, I had all these ideas on things that I wanted to share about her. And I came out of the meeting crying. I was so stressed out, and I didn't share any of those things. So I decided at that moment, I have got to figure out a way that I can share this and make sure that it gets shared. And so I did a one-page profile, which turned out to be a trifold brochure, like 2 pages of all the things that I wanted to share with the team. And then if I got emotional or if I got, sidetracked and all this other stuff that was happening, I could just hand them the brochures at that point, and they could look at that. They could use that when they're thinking about building, curriculum and think about, how to best support her. They had this information. So this is one of my super favorite tools. And again, you can use them for any age group, transitions to anything, or we've done one-page profiles for, students wanting to find friends, like what are they interested in? So anything, we can help you. We actually have a one-page profile class coming up. So we'll share information about that class, but we would love to help you build a one-page profile for your child. So another way to share input is through it can be handwritten, it can be typed, but kind of putting your parent concerns and input. It's a section right in the IEP, and so many times we'll be in an IEP meeting and they'll be like, so what are you concerned about? What are the strengths of your child? And it's at that moment, like, I don't know what happens, but your mind can just go blank and you're like, I don't know what she likes to do. I guess she likes dancing, singing. I don't know what my concerns are, you know? And so having this prepared ahead of time is super helpful. It's helpful for you to organize your thoughts. It's helpful because I can write out something and I can give it to my husband so he can look at it and he can add his input, because oftentimes he's not able to attend the meetings with me, or you know, you can get a lot of different input, and then you can submit something that's organized and thoughtful. And when they ask you the question, you can be like, here's my input. Like, it's so much easier for me to do that, and I know others. And so this is just an example of things that you can put on there. But what concerns do you have? That's a question they always ask. What's your child good at? Strengths, motivators, how do they learn best? When they're struggling, what kind of supports do they need? These are just an idea of things that you can put in that. So I recommend doing a one-page profile every year, because your child changes so fast. Even at 17, it's amazing how fast things change. And then I always recommend doing a written parent input and concerns for every single IEP meeting. Even when things are going amazing, there's always something that I'm concerned about as a parent. Like, it might not be right at this moment. It might be what happens in a year and a half from now, or what happens, you know, for graduation, like some of those kinds of things. So there's always something to be concerned about, in my opinion, or something that I just want to know more about, because I like information. Excuse me. So transition, for students that are 16 years of age or older, there are transition planning pages added to the IEP. And that is really to look at things that are going to prepare your child for life after school, that, you know, further education, independent living, employment, you know, transition services. Any student that graduates with anything other than a general education standard diploma, they have the access to transition services after they've graduated, to help them with that transition to adulthood. A lot of really great services. I almost wish that was something available to everyone, because I know my boys transitioning to adulthood could have used a little extra help. But yeah, so transition pages for 16 and older, and definitely when you're talking about 16 and older, the student should be at every single IEP meeting. One of the things that you're going to talk about in the transition section also are the diploma options. Excuse me. The anticipated graduation date is usually on there. There's a regular diploma, which is 24 credits that are predetermined by the state of Oregon. There's a modified diploma that has still 24 credits. 12 of them are predetermined, and 12 of them are more flexible and kind of can be determined by the team. There's an extended diploma, which has 12 credits to it. And one thing we don't even put on here, but I do want to mention, because I just today learned of another student who is receiving a certificate. Basically, it says you showed up. There's no diploma, there's no, you know, anything with it. It basically just says you came to school, thank you very much. And I feel like that is so wrong, because our students that are on 504 plans and IEPs, they work harder than many, many other students, and they absolutely deserve a diploma. So if you're unsure what track your student is on for a diploma option, and that they usually start determining those as early as 13. So start asking, start, exploring what these different diploma options are. We have these diploma options standard across the state of Oregon. Some school districts have additional options, like honors diplomas or things like that, but these three and a certificate have to be offered in every single school district. So definitely ask and see what track your student is on. And then for students, once they turn 18, this transfer of rights has to occur. And so it doesn't matter if it's mid-year, the student has to give the parent or guardian rights to have access to any of their educational information. So definitely something to think about as your student gets close to that 18 years of age. Goals. Goals are super important because goals determine a lot of the placement. And so when we talk about goals, we talk about SMART goals, making sure that they are specific, that they are measurable, they're attainable, relevant, and time-based. You want to know all of those things in a goal. We used to see a lot of goals that weren't SMART goals that were like, Johnny, and his name wasn't Johnny, but I'll use that name. Johnny will not kick, hit, spit, run, or wrestle, I think it said. He was a 5-year-old boy. I'm thinking, what 5-year-old boy doesn't do any of those things? That's so weird. There was nothing measurable about it. It really wasn't attainable because what 5-year-old boy doesn't hit, kick, spit, or any of those things? Was it relevant? Did it align with any sort of educational goal that the team wanted for that student? Probably not. Was it time-based? No, it didn't have any sort of time limit on it. So for the rest of his life, poor Johnny wasn't allowed to do any of those things. So some, a SMART goal might be that Sally learns all 26 letters of the alphabet as measurable by observation and assessment. It's something totally appropriate and attainable for her. It's relevant because she wants to read, the family wants her to read, the team wants her to read, so it's relevant to the mission. And it's time-based because we're saying in 126 weeks or, there's always a time limit on it. And then we evaluate at the end of that time to make sure that Sally has met that goal or not. And we can reassess and decide if we want to keep that goal or redesign that goal, scaffold it maybe. So SMART goals are super important, and you should make sure that when we get to the attainable part, that's something that you have to watch for, because oftentimes we see, teams, they're nervous because they don't want to set goals too big because it might not be attainable. So that's a hurdle because we never want to set a goal that's too low, but sometimes that's what we see happening. And so making sure that these goals are robust, making sure that your student is going to have to work and the team is going to have to help them work to reach these goals. And so just not making them really easy to attain, like you don't really have to do much and students naturally going to learn those extra 2 letters of the alphabet no matter what. So SMART goals. And then we get into service summary. In the service summary, a couple of the most important things for me are accommodations and modifications. Accommodations are anything that removes the barrier, so it levels the playing field for that student. There's some examples here on the slide, and we'll make this slide deck available to everyone. But some of the things that are on Victoria's IEP are that she has the audiobook. So in English class this junior year, they're all reading a certain book. Well, she has the book and she listens to the book because that helps her. And so that's one of the accommodations she has. She has an accommodation of preferential seating. Because of her hearing loss, sometimes it's hard for her to hear different educators as they speak. And so having preferential seating and being able to sit in the front of the class is really helpful to her. She also does a lot of visual schedules. She's allowed assistive technology to do speech to text. So when she's writing long papers, it takes a long time for her to type. And it's just a different skill. And so for papers, either she can use a scribe, so she can verbally tell somebody her story and they write it down and then she types it in, or she can use voice to text and then just have to proofread it instead of typing the whole thing out. So just a few examples. There are hundreds and hundreds of accommodations available for all different types of needs. The list just goes on and on. We have pages and pages we can send you if that's ever helpful. Modifications, that's something that actually changes the material or the curriculum. So that would be like if in Victoria's junior English class, they're reading the Scarlet Letter or whatever, and that's too complex of a book for her to comprehend or read, whatever it might be. The team might decide that reading Huck Finn might be more accessible for her. It's maybe at a different reading level or something like that. So when you're totally changing the expectation and the curriculum, that's considered a modification. And therefore, if you're changing any of that, then it would be a modified grade at the end of that class. And so there, again, are some other examples here. You know, sometimes it's a totally different assignment. Sometimes it's you're just excused from part of the work. So maybe instead of, you know, reading the book, you get to do something totally different. So there's, again, hundreds of modifications that can be done. Another piece of the service summary are related services. So that's all those people that we talked about, like occupational therapy, speech and language, behavior, nursing, transportation. And one thing that we often don't think about are all the other activities that are offered by the school. So if the school has a football team and your student on an IEP wants to play football, but he needs some support to do that, that is absolutely covered under the IEP and should be brought up in your parent input and addressed. How can this student participate in that? Drama, choir, any of those types of school offered activities. There's all kinds of clubs once you get to high school. Those are activities that should and can be supported under a student's IEP. These related services, when we start talking about the therapies, especially speech, occupational, physical therapy, those kinds of things, those are only therapies for them to access their education before the students entered school, when they were maybe on an IFSP, an individual family service plan. The speech and physical therapy and occupational therapy, those all looked a little different because they were more helping the child access their environment. But then once they transition into school age, it's more about accessing just their education. So can the student get up the stairs to get to the second level to access the classes up there? They might need some physical therapists to help give them some strategies or, you know, some different things like that. So related service. In this, it will also say how many minutes. So it might say Johnny receives 120 minutes of speech therapy, you know, per month. It'll give you the minutes and the time frame that you can use those minutes. So there's that, the next thing we talk about is placement. So if you remember earlier, this was my desire to talk about this at the beginning. Well, this is the very last thing that we talk about. And by the time you get to this page, nothing that we've talked about before should be a surprise. And when you get to this page, the placement should also not be a surprise. The rest of the document informs the placement. So this is where, as a team, you and everybody else decide where's the least restrictive environment, where's the best place for my student to learn. So this is the kind of the continuum. So the least restrictive placement is always the general education class. Some students have the general education class with pullouts or push-in, which is just support for them to access that class. Some students receive their education in a special education classroom, some in a special school. We have, in Bend, we have a behavior program that's in a separate school. There are residential schools, at-home placements, or a hospital placement. All of those placements require the same services. So whatever is determined in the IEP, no matter where the student goes in that continuum, those services should be provided. And anytime a student is placed in a more restricted environment, so say your student is really struggling in behavior, so they put them in the behavior program. Anytime that happens, there should always be a plan for what needs to happen, what does he need to do, what do we need to do in order to get him back into the general education class with support. So it never should be like, oh, this is where he is and this is just where he's going to be for the year or the rest of his education. There should always be a plan to keep moving up to that least restrictive environment. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about 504 plans. We get a lot of questions about the differences between the two, so I'm going to just highlight a few of the differences. The 504 plan is actually a federal civil rights law, so it's not an education law, it's a civil rights law. It was came out in 1973, so quite a few years ago, and it was really to stop or minimize the discrimination against people with disabilities. So a 504. Who's protected under a 504 plan? Any person who has a physical and mental impairment that substantially limits one or more life activities. Having a record of such an impairment, like, you know, medical record or that kind of thing, being regarded as having such an impairment, and each condition has to have an individual evaluation. So if you come in and list 5 different things, you have to have 5 different evaluations. For many students on 504s, we see students with maybe a traumatic brain injury or students that are temporary on 504 because of a concussion even, or something like that. A 504 plan is something that you can put in effect at any time, even when it's a temporary disability and the student might need a little bit of help, or maybe the student broke their leg and is using a wheelchair for a while and needs some accommodations to get in and out of the restroom, or needs to leave class a little bit early so he doesn't, you know, walk down the super crowded hallways. He can actually get to his next class on time, or, you know, things like that. We'll talk a little bit more. So these are some of the really common types of disabilities that we see that are covered under a 504 plan. ADHD, dyslexia, you know, I won't read all of these, but these are very common. So oftentimes too, like diabetes or like internal stuff. So a lot of things that are like not visible to a lot of people a lot of times. So it might even be like asthma or, you know, the diabetes thing. We have a lot of students who need to like be excused to go do insulin or check their blood sugar or different things like that. So those are the types of accommodations that would generally be under a 504. This is a sample template. So it's much shorter and much less complicated than an IEP. It has different protection, but not as much protection under the law as an IEP. But you should always come back to this template if you're looking for who do I contact? You know, when did this go into effect? If you're unsure of what accommodations were actually written into it, you should be getting a copy of this plan the same as you would with an IEP. And again, this can change at any time the student's needs change. You would ask for a 504 meeting to make any adjustments. Here's some more sample accommodations. So textbooks, curriculum, the classroom environment, assignments, transition time. We had talked about the boy, you know, breaking his leg and being in a wheelchair, and it takes them extra time to get to class. Handwriting, grading, testing. I mean, there's tons and tons of different options. Some of that preferential seating, behavior chart, time management, help with organization. These are just a few of hundreds of examples. So here's just a chart to kind of compare the two, like what it does, the IEP versus the 504. The IEP really provides that special education and related services to meet that child's unique needs. And a 504, what did I just do? Oh my gosh, I don't know what just happened. I didn't think I touched anything. Sorry. So in a 504, it provides services and changes the learning environment, changes to the learning environment. So 504 is really just accommodations versus the total individual special education plan. So if you need any modifications, that's usually what I tell parents when I listen and they're asking about the differences. If your student needs anything modified, then the IEP is the way. If they just need accommodations to level that playing field, then the 504 is the tool that you would use for that. So who is eligible? We've talked a little bit about these, but for an IEP, having one of the 13 disability categories that were listed in IDA, that makes you eligible for an IEP. And the 504 is a huge, wide variety of disabilities that could interfere with your learning. And who creates it? Both, whoa, what is happening? Both are created by teams with the school, and both the parent is a very, very important member, and the child whenever possible. Oftentimes, the students or children have ideas that the rest of the team hasn't thought of because they know themselves the best, right? So a lot of times they'll have ideas, and if you have their buy-in, the ideas just might be more successful than if a bunch of adults come up with the ideas by themselves. So this is just a chart kind of comparing the two. And right now, we've had so many questions about comprehensive distance learning. In some districts right now, they're moving to hybrid models. Some are moving to more in-person. Redmond School District has put theirs off now until like the end of February. So many different things. But what I want you to know is nothing has changed in the law. Your students have the same rights and requirements for the districts to uphold their IEPs. They should be receiving the same services that they did before COVID and before comprehensive distance learning. So everything's changed, and so that looks different. Some of the things and the ways that that looks different for Victoria is that she's on her computer learning all the time, but she can log in and work with a special educator if she needs to. Her speech and language pathologist still has a time once a week that she logs in, and they have a Zoom meeting in order to get her minutes and support that she needs in speech and language. We're still implementing all of the accommodations that made her so successful in those general education classrooms, and she's still attending all those general education classes. What I would like you to know is that for students, many, many things aren't working, and oh, Lord knows we've had enough of those here in our house, of things that just aren't working at all. And so these are some suggestions when things aren't working for your student. Make sure to write that parent input and concerns, what we talked about. Do a one-page profile if you haven't done one already this year. Document what's working and what's not working, keeping a log. And I know that's hard when we're all working ourselves and, you know, helping multiple kids and all of the different things that happen at home these days. But making sure and documenting that stuff, making sure and documenting when the school contacts you, or if you have a concern, like how it's addressed. Making sure that you do get the time that is in the IEP with those related service personnel, the speech, the occupational therapist. There's a variety of ways that those services can be delivered. And making sure, especially to document where you see regression. So if you see your student slipping back from skills that they had before COVID, then that's absolutely something to document and advocate for with the team. Any additional barriers for your student to access their CDL? We have all kinds of families. Some families have multiple kids and mom and dad all working from home. The like broadband shuts down all the time because there's too much, too many people accessing it. We have families that don't have internet at all. We have families who mom and dad have to go to work, and older siblings are home with the younger siblings all day and they're trying to do school. Any of those types of barriers, you should document it. It's just part of what's happening right now. It's hard. And of course, anytime, whether it's comprehensive distance learning or during the regular school year, anytime you have concerns or things aren't going well, call an IEP meeting. Again, you can call one at any time. There's no limit on how many of those you can have a year. Come prepared, and it's a very successful tool in advocacy for your kiddos in school. Here are some additional resources that we recommend that parents love. This will be in your slide deck, so you'll get all of these. A couple of things I wanted to point out. Disability Rights Oregon is our statewide advocacy organization for special education and all things disability. So anytime you have a complaint or need help or that kind of stuff in the legal realm, they would be my first phone call. And if they can't help you, they will direct you to somebody who can. The U.S. Department of Justice Civil Rights Division, that would be your 504 advocacy. They have all kinds of information. If you need to file a complaint or anything like that, that's where you would go. The rest of these are great resources as well. They all provide different types of information, and definitely access those. Question time. I see that there are some questions in the chat. I can't see them all, but Jenny's going to jump in and help us out with that.
So we actually didn't have any specific questions that were to do with the material. We had one question whether this was going to be made available for people to watch later. Yes, we are recording it, and yes, it will be up on our website along with the slide deck. But I would like to open it up if people now want to think about what the content was and if you have questions, because that was a lot of information.
Happy to answer anything. Or again, if there's, you know, things that are more personal that you don't feel like asking here, feel free to email us. I'll put our email address up here shortly too.
So I have a couple of comments. If you do have a question and you would rather not type it in the chat, we can totally open up the microphone so that you can verbally ask the question. I know sometimes I have so much to say that typing it would take the rest of this 15 minutes we have. So we have a comment that learning more about the IEP and rights of children experiencing behaviors during school hours and at risk of being expelled are topics I need to know more about.
Yes, that is very important. I have a lot of information that I can share about behavior in the IEP. If you email me that, if you have specific questions, or generally I can send you Disability Rights Oregon has a bunch of information. I have a bunch of information I would love to share about that. So feel free to email me and I will send that directly to you.
I put Diana's email in the chat and you'll see it come up on the screen when we get to the next slide where it shares our information. I also put in the chat the information that was on that slide for resources. As Diana said, it will be up on the website on the slide deck, but if you wanted to access it through the chat, you could copy and paste it tonight. Thanks, Sheila. I will share your email with Diana.
Hi, Sheila. I can put this up, so if you're waiting for this, you can just email us at info@codsn.org, and that comes to both Jenny and I, and whoever is available first will get back to you.
I'm gonna pick on Danny because I think she can answer my question better than I can answer it myself. But Danny, could you talk a little bit about if a foster parent had a child come into care and they were likely going to be a long-term placement and wanted to learn more about the child's education, kind of what that dynamic would look like with the school and engaging in meetings and reading the IEP and that kind of thing? If you're out there.
Sure, I'm still here. Sorry, I was like struggling to unmute everyone. Also going to turn on my video here in a second. Now that I'm looking at the shared screen, I have no idea how to turn back on my video, but there I am. Well, almost. So if a foster parent, hi everyone. If a foster parent wanted to learn more about a child's IEP or 504 plan when they come into care, sometimes the problem is going to be that we don't have that documentation right away, but we can request it. And that can be obtained from both the caseworker, and then also we can request those documents from the school and sign releases for that foster parent so they can request information at any time for themselves. So we can help to sort of bridge that gap. In the meantime, again, one of the areas that can be a little problematic is when sometimes kids come into our care that have been in many different school systems. And that was something that I definitely experienced as a caseworker. And it took some time to get educational documentation from other states about a specific kiddo that I had. So it was kind of a it's kind of an interesting experience, even with the school having to figure out how to piece everything together, but it took a little time and we were able to do that. So I think really reaching out to your caseworker is a great idea, but also reaching out to Emily or myself so we can assist, because sometimes I think even the paperwork is buried a little bit for caseworkers, and maybe it's hard to identify if sometimes if kiddos even have 504 or IEP plans happening at the time that they come into care. And maybe it's appropriate based on behaviors to request some of those things happen, or at least request the initial meeting. That's also something that is really important, is if you are a foster family, to really advocate for the child in your care if you feel that there's things coming up that seem out of the ordinary, or that more services are needed at school. Maybe it doesn't rise to the level of an IEP or a 504, but asking for that meeting to occur just to chat about it is always a good thing, and to advocate for kids in your home if you are seeing things that are concerning.
Definitely. If we have other questions out there, we would be happy to answer them. Well, we are always available to answer questions via phone, email. You know, when we used to have in-person IEP meetings, occasionally, if it's a real tumultuous IEP, we would attend. There are thousands of IEP meetings, so we can't attend them all, but we would be happy to help you guys with any of the tools to do person-centered plans. Jenny, what's the date of the person-centered planning training that we're doing where they can come and build their one-page profile?
Yeah, I put that in the chat. I'm trying to pull it up right now. I'm having some screen sharing issues as usual. Technology is not being my friend.
Mine either tonight.
Diana, can you stop sharing your screen for a minute? Maybe that will help.
Yes.
So I was trying to pull up the flyer. Here we go. Sorry, guys. Can you see it?
Yes.
Are you seeing the
Yes.
person-centered planning? So it's on Thursday, February 4th from 4 to 5. And we have on February 8th another opportunity that is going to be our parent support group. And we're going to be giving you an opportunity then to do that as well. I also really quick want to draw your eye to, we have a trauma-informed training coming up for families called Trauma 2021. That's on February 16th, and any of you are welcome to register. These are all on our website under codsn.org/events. And the registration is right there. We also have a book club coming up that we would love for you guys to join. This is The Power of Showing Up, which is a great information about being there for your child as you raise them. And we have Shandell Landon. She's a parent and a special educator who's going to facilitate that group. We're excited about that. So a couple of opportunities for you guys that are coming up.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to turn the recording off now, since we don't seem to have, oh, hang on, I've got some chats. What happened? Awesome upcoming trainings. Thanks for all the resources you share with our community. You're welcome. Thank you.
Yes. Well, thank you guys so much for spending part of your evening with us. We really appreciate it and hope this was helpful. Don't hesitate to reach out. I'm not going to stop saying that because we're here to help you guys. So reach out to us, and anytime we would love to help. So thank you for having the time to spend with us, and happy IEP 504 meetings.